So, the earliest memory I suppose I'd have would be going to school, my first day going to school. I remember my father, I think my mother brought me up as well to St. Philomena's. And, of course, I couldn't wait to get dressed up in the uniform and all that. And when I found my mother was gone, I nearly died.
There were only two of us. My parents, as I said, were older. Very much wanted children. Gobnait arrived first in 1928. She was the real little goody two-shoes with the curly hair and the sweet little face, and did everything she was told. And then 3.5 years later I was born. There was a great fuss about it, and I still remember my father saying, "Your sister never wanted you."
Bill Birmingham's husband, Davy Birmingham, was saying to me, "Well, this lassie comes, she'll boss the daylights out of you."
So, yes, she used to say to my father, "We'll pull her eyes out and then we'll throw her down the stairs." Her way of dealing with me was that she took me in charge. She was my big sister and looked after me, made sure I did everything was either a sin or not a sin.
So, I don't remember her being born at all. I don't remember her being born. All I remember is, really, we have Mary Gaffey. And Mary Gaffey did everything for us. Dressed us, washed our clothes, did our shoes. My mother did our hair. And when she'd be too busy upstairs, she'd come down to the shop and she'd put in my ringlets below. Maura had short hair, I had long. You saw the photograph, did you, Maura's? My mother and father thought it would be a great idea to send me to Bruff, because it was Maura Wall's last year, and that she'd break me in the wild horse. And of course I was delighted to be going, this big trunk and all these clothes and everything put into it. But when I got there, I'd learned them for 2 years. I was always crying. I was crying after my father and mother, because you see there was only two of us and we were doused, as my mother would say. And I hated Bruff. I wanted to go home, and I remember Maura Wall saying to me, "Why are you crying?" And she'd say, "Is the lessons too hard?" Of course they were too hard. I came from, after making my first communion, to Bruff. I was 10, just 10. And, oh God, I wasn't hardly able to brush my hair. But Maura Wall was there. Maura Wall said, "If the lessons are too hard," and I'd say, "No, you didn't come to mind the lessons. You don't have to learn those at all." And I always said to her, "You say to her, Lord Mercer, were it not for you, I'd have a degree now." Domitilla now was head girl in Bruff, one of the head girls, and she was very popular. But she used to be always, I'm sure she was embarrassed with me always crying. And my mother and father would come out every Sunday. Oh, and I hate the thought of they going away. Now, Auntie Wall, as we used to call her, was very good to me. She'd come down on a Sunday to see me, and that, of course, bring me sweets. And then she'd get permission for me to go up to her house, and she'd bring me down in the morning in time for class at 9 o'clock. Oh God, I remember one day morning I was going back and she'd a fur coat, and I put my hand on the fur coat and a mouse ran out of it. Nearly killed me. But I learned nothing for 3 years. Anyway, we should have been sent down to the primary school. There was Lucy Corcoran, the other girl, they owned the hotel in Bunratty, Corbett, Sheila Corbett, and myself, 3 of us. And we were at the side here, first years were over there. We were supposed to do French, sure, I was hardly able to write my name. And my report would come home, first, second, third. My father said to me, "Well now, Gubby, that's great, third. Could you not get second?" Sure, I couldn't get second. There was only 3 of us. But when the inspector would come, we'd be hushed up to the study hall or out in the garden. But if there was plays or concerts on, I was always the one that was picked. That shouldn't have been.
My sister Gobnait went to Bruff when she was about 10, I think. She was really lonely and hated it, but she had the cousins. Then when it came to my turn to go to boarding school at 12, at 10 I got meningitis. We got every illness that was going that time. We got mumps, measles, tonsils, tonsillectomies done. I recovered from that, and because of that and because of the fear of TB and all the other things, I wasn't to be too far away from home. So I went into the boarding school in Norlhill and loved it. I loved every minute of my school days. We got home for Christmas and Easter, or if your parents wanted to take you out for, like, to go to the doctor or the dentist or something. But apart from that, and we didn't think that was bad. I loved it because Gobnait was in Bruff and I had nobody to play with. There was no such thing as community where we lived. So while Gobnait was with the same order of nuns, the FCJs in Bruff, and I was in Laurel Hill, even that was a rivalry. The two schools were a rivalry, even though they were run by the same. And Laurel Hill would have definitely been more snobbish, more upmarket. We were taught manners which belonged to the 17th century, actually, 18th century.
Bridge O'Neill was great fun. Learned nothing, of course, but great fun. Then I went into second year, and then I started getting parts in the plays, and that was my making. It's very important, you see, get a part. This time I remember I got the part of the Nativity of Our Lady in St. Joseph's, and she told me to put a big pillow inside my uniform. Do you know now, Gobnait, she said, if you got a picture of Our Lady and kept studying it, you might turn like her. Did you ever hear the bent of it? Then I come home for the holidays. Now, coming home from the holidays, there was Mary O'Grady. Do you remember O'Grady's in O'Connell Street with the Chinaman over the door? She was in Bruff with us, and they'd have a huge party. And you'd be invited, of course. And it was great. And this fella came along one night, Pat Scanlon, did you ever hear? Sit down there now, I'll take ye home. Now, we were told Maura and I to be home at 9 o'clock. It was 11. My father was above in that bed, and he like a lunatic. Not outside the door will you two go until you go back to school. So we'd be all fighting then over the school. Oh, we do this in Bruff, and we do this in Laurel Hill, and we do this. And my mother said, well, I wish to God you were gone back. And then she'd be crying the day we'd be gone back. But my father would take us out to Bruff and collect Reed O'Neill and Madeleine Meehan and that. But Madeleine was great fun.
I would have loved to have lived in over the river, the other side of the river, the Ennis Road area. I mean, that was my thing, or Perry Square or somewhere like that. You always wanted something better. But we would have rather been not living over a shop. But the compensation for that is we went to Killonan, which was the farm, and I really feel that was such an important experience. We really had the richness of a farm. We were able to do everything. I remember we'd get little jobs to do. I used to get the mangles, where you put them in a mangle and turn them. The other job I had when I was very small was holding the strainer over the milk churn, and as they emptied the buckets of milk. And then you'd see all the grass and the flies in the strainer and getting into trouble because I dropped it. They're two very different people, my parents. My mother was, I would say, the local social. She was in the shop, but everybody came in with their problems to her, and she was a great listener. And there was a box in the corner, it's an L-shaped drapery shop, and there was a box in the corner. And when people wanted to talk to my mother, they would sit in that padded blue box until she was free. You have to remember, when we were growing up, there were no social workers, no psychologists, no public health nurses, nothing. So the social life was very different. We were, I suppose, what you would call comfortable. My father seemed to throw money around at a great rate. We were never short of money, and he would give you money. I'd say, Daddy, I don't need it. We'll have a few bob anyway for sweets. My mother was totally different. She came up feeling that on the farm there were 13 of them, and they were reared to mend and redo and remake. She was very gifted.
But I'm telling you, she was a tough, hard master, you know. She was very good, very good. You can have anything out of that shop you want, but you put your name down the book and you take so much off it per week, and I was only getting 5 shillings.
And also, her religion was very interesting. She was quite sceptical about religion at one level, but she was deeply what I would call Zen in another way. And then how that manifested itself was the way people came to her when friends were dying or family were dying. She'd be the one who would drop everything and be with them without any training in that. It just came naturally. People would come in with their family problems, and we used to try and listen, pretend we were helping in the shop and listening to the stories. So I grew up listening to her, listening to people. That was the shop. My father wouldn't go inside the shop door. He wouldn't be seen dead in it. As far as he was concerned, that was feminine stuff, because she catered for women and children, not for men. She dressed us up like 2 dolls. We were always dressed in the patent shoes and white socks and the little taffeta dresses. And she bought her stuff from London. There were agents went around, and she would pick for us something that wasn't in any other shop, which were like advertisements. That was great until we went to Kelowna in the white shoes and the white socks, and then you were in the muck with the hens and the pigs and the cows and the whole lot of it. So we were dying to get trousers and Wellingtons. That was my big prayer when I was a child, that Santa Claus would bring me trousers and Wellingtons.
She'd kill you if you left out a person. If you came in now for a pair, a blue cardigan, and you didn't buy it, and she said to me, why didn't that woman buy that blue cardigan? Because I hadn't it in her size. Why didn't you sell her a pink one? You'll be no good. She'd kill you if you left out anyway. You see, a swap, they call that. And
the other great joy as a child was going to Kilkee. And once May came, June, my mother started saying, what about Sunday, Bill, are we going to Kilkee? Now, he loved driving, that was fine, but not very fast. So it took us ages to get the 60 miles down to Kilkee, and you had to be stopped in the pub on the way, the famous O'D's. And he'd say, for medicinal. And my mother would have they had egg flips with whiskey in them. Horrible things. And then we'd set off again, and then we'd say, we'd get to Kilkee, and we were all down for the Strand, and he would only spend the day, he would not spend the night.
This time of the year now, there'll be politics on. Hello, John, how are you? Fine, Bill. Come on up. Upstairs, bottle of whiskey opened. If they didn't come down langers, my mother used to be terrified of them come down the stairs in case they'd slip. And
my own feeling about him was that sometimes if he had drink taken, the only way he'd react is he'd be weepy, depressed, and I felt some of the drinking had to do with depression, tears in his eyes, and a lot of that was about sadness, I think, of being out in the troubles.
and then we do our lessons at the kitchen table, and my father be sitting in front of the fire, you know, reading the paper, and he wouldn't sit at a bad fire. It always had to be a big one. My mother was petrified the house caught fire. Always a big one. Every Mary throw down more coal there. Every Mary get another bucket of coal. And we'd be doing our lessons, and he'd hear this, what's going on up there? Nothing, Dad, nothing, Dad. We'd be fighting between us, and I can always remember, Gobnait, pass up the ink. As I shove it up with the ruler like that. What's going on up there? And Gaff'd be dying laughing. She'd be having the sport of her life.
The great story was he made an escape from Limerick jail with, I think, 15 others. They built a tunnel, and he was part of the engineering of the tunnel, and that was his great. Now, that was during the War of Independence, not during the Civil War. They made their break out under a telegraph pole in the laneway at the side of the jail boreen. And every time we'd pass, he'd tell you the same thing, the same story about that night. The sad bit and the funny bit of it was that he had a motorcycle hidden. A friend had hidden a motorcycle for him. The others got away on bicycles and got friends. But he went back to Bruff on the bike and stayed in a safe house. And it was all bound up with Easter and sacrifice and blood sacrifice and escaping, and it was all very exciting sort of stuff. But the others went drinking in a pub out in Patrick's Well and were recaptured, most of them. And he escaped. He never got recaptured, even though he had all sorts of stories of carrying loaded revolvers in his hip pocket and being stopped by the police, and turning his bike around to cover he said they were so stupid that they didn't realise they were searching the same side twice because he turned around.
I then entered the FCJs. Thought I'd never get out of it. I left Bruff in June, and I joined them in January. You could only write home in the third person, pretending you loved it and you hated it. I couldn't believe when she told me that, I'm very sorry, dear, but I don't think you're suitable for the order. I'd nearly have given her a kiss. Sure, I had an eye on Jerry and Jerry had an eye on me. I remember, you see, Jerry had a bet with Donny. He thought I was doing a line with Donny. Madeleine Meehan they were dying for Madeleine Meehan. Her father was a coal merchant to marry Donny. But nothing doing, but Jerry thought Donny was after me. And he turned around and he said, I'll do this fell out. And my mother went off to Rome and he said, we'll have a night out before she comes back. But he told me the second night he was out with me, he wanted to marry me. But we were going together for 3 years after that. But, oh yes, how my father found out about it, my father, not too keen, the Kellys. Daddy, where were they during the troubled times? Under the bed. And Jerry brought me to the Savoy to a concert. And I bought a few tickets, being decent. And didn't we win £50? And I never said that to my father about going out with him or going to pictures. And my mother knew, father, he wanted to know what kind of his inside pants to be. But anyway, the next thing was, I wouldn't go up for the money and he went up. And who was sitting behind me? Only Maureen Gallagher. Now her father was out in the troubles with my father. Maureen was very good looking. She married a fella, the Sullivans, afterwards. And he'd be always down there in their office ordering bits of pipes and things, you know, for her. And she'd go down, oh, hello, Maureen, how are you? Fine, Mr. Wall. I saw Gobnait and Jerry Kelly at the concert last night. Now, he did not know. So he came back at 1 o'clock for his dinner. And he says to my mother, did you know that Gobby went down to the Savoy with that fella, the Kellys? Oh yes, she said it to me. And she never said it to me. So, next day, he'd say, So you were at the Savoy, the Kellys, and you won money. Half that money is to be given to the boy, the Kellys. You're not to keep it all. Sure enough, you're such an idiot. I give you half it. But
so my mother put a ban on all conversation about politics, and then religion was the next one. Sex was never mentioned. That didn't exist until Gay Byrne came in. So there was absolutely no talk. We'd talk about you'd marry a tall, handsome, dark man who'd be kind. And one day I said, now I know the kind of man I'm going to marry. He's going to be tall, dark, very kind, very generous, lots of money. And my mother said, are you talking about God? She said, because they don't exist. And I don't know where it went in somewhere, that maybe there isn't a guy out there that I'm ever going to meet that will fulfill the dreams.
Mary Gaffey got married, I think, before I got married. But I can always remember, I was very good at the needle and the dressmaking. And my mother be always sending over me to come over and turn up those dresses or coats, you know. But Mary Gaffey came in one day. What are you doing? She said to me. Oh, I'm making a morning coat. That's her. For who? She said to me. For myself. She threw her eyes up to heaven. She said, anyway. And what's that you're making? Oh, that's a bag that I'll carry down my things to the toilet. And she burst out laughing. She said she knew damn well. Sure, I became pregnant while I was in my honeymoon. But, she said I was laughing when I heard you saying that.
So then she became pregnant. Then, of course, she had Catherine 9 months and a week later. Which was, my mother's afraid it wouldn't be 9 months and a week later. But would you imagine Catholic Ireland? It had to be 9 months and a week later. But anyway, Catherine arrived in joy of. Now, what took me the religious route, and I never wanted to be religious, never wanted to be a nun. That was on the cards from day one. What I wanted to be was a missionary. With that, then I entered, and then you have to do a novitiate for 2.5 years, and then you have to be trained in something. So I was asked to do medicine, and I said, no, I really didn't think I could do medicine. So I got a choice, and she said, what would you like to do? And I said, I'd like to do social work. Now, there was only one course in Ireland, that was an UCD for a diploma in social work. So I went and did that, and then went to London for a year to do medical social work. Well, our digs, we were in a convent, in which kind of had a hostel for nuns in university, which was run by French madames. We were starved, and it was in Cottesmore Gardens, very posh. My placement 2 days a week was in the London Hospital in Whitechapel, and that was fascinating. We were part of the staff, and then we were sent on home visits. And I don't know if you ever saw Call the Midwife. Well, we were exactly like those. We dressed like them in the grey gabardine coats and the bikes. Exactly. And that was the kind of people that we were dealing with in Petticoat Lane and home visits in the East End of London. And that was the same time. That was exactly the same time in the 50s. It was 1959. And anyway, the next day I got off, and when I landed in Nigeria, I was told I was going to be secretary of a conference, of an international conference on social development. I didn't know the names of the places. I didn't know the names. I said to the guy who was organising it, this is a bad mistake. My feet are swelling. I can't bear the heat, and I don't know what I'm doing here. He said, no, you'll be grand. You'll be fine. So, how would I say, full baptism of missionary work. Went to leprosy colonies, went to down river in little boats to clinics, run by 2 midwives, and the doctor would be medical missionary. So that was wonderful, because I spent that time going around to the different missions. The fellow that I hired a taxi was you sat on the back of a bike and held on to his waist in the bush. And this guy, we're trying to place a child who had been abandoned in the hospital. So I looked for a taxi, and this fella came out, delighted to take a white woman, because he'd ring the bell the whole way along to advertise his client. So I sat up in the back of the bike, and it was only about 3 miles out. It was in the bush. So it was $1. Taxi fare was $1. So I was just worried in case I wouldn't have enough. And I said to him, "What's the fare?" $1. I said, "What's your name?" He said, "Brian Baru." I said, "Brian Baru." He said, "Yes, the father called me that. The father who baptized me called me that." As the guy from the university said to me, he was lovely. He spent a year, he was a teacher and then was teaching in the university. But he said, "Maura," he came and gave a lecture on the how Christianity came to Africa, particularly Nigeria. And he talked about the early days, I think the Spanish went out first, and then you had the French, and then you had the English, and then you had the Irish, and then you had the Aer Lingus version. They get on a plane, in Dublin, and they were parked out to Nigeria to be parish priests or helping the priests. And he said the whole interest was to try and get the Africans to play Gaelic football or learn Irish songs. And during the Biafran War, I was there during the Biafran War, and it was really scary, turning on the radio in the morning and hearing A Nation Once Again to Boston. And in 1966, I got the presidential scholarship. There was one presidential scholarship for social work, and I got that, and I went to Boston. And I was in Boston 66, 67, 68. 2 full years. And during that time, Martin Luther King was killed and Robert Kennedy was killed. And we were marching every weekend for civil rights, human rights, anti-Vietnam War, you name it. Because we were social work postgraduate students, we were expected to be out on the streets. And it was the most fascinating time. Everything was changing. All the institutions were changing. The church was changing. There was questions, there was an underground church, which of course we joined. And that. So that was the whole trend of, it was upbeat. It was hippie time. It was all about love and roses, it was, and at the same time there were terrible wars going on. And there was a lot of rebellion of students in universities for social justice issues. So when that was finished in 1969, I came back to Drogheda, and they asked if I would be allowed to go back to Ibadan because they were setting up
we lived there until Gobnait was born. And Nanny Kelly then thought it wasn't healthy with all the old flour and meal, the dust. And she said to me, "I'm selling my house, make him buy it." And he didn't want to buy it at all. He wanted to buy a farm. Anyway, I was mad for it because it was so near the schools and near the shop and everything. Anyway, we bought it off her. And there was £2,000 left when she died that we hadn't paid her. Veterinary and Peggy took it off us, Well, we had to pay them. But she was very good to me. If I was up around that way, I'd always call into her. And she said to me, "Go down and buy a coat for yourself." She was very good to me. So we bought Iroquois then. And she left us the hall stand. That one. And that little chair. What else she leave us out the house? What she said was words with Peggy and Norrie, you know.
And
Lisa,
then I suddenly thought, I can do this work and I can do it better, where I'm not constrained and I probably end up an angry, bitter old lady. So I want to leave. And I was clear as a bell. So I wrote back and said I'd like to leave. I hadn't thought about it. And I'd like to finish my contract and go in June. Now that was unheard of, because if you were leaving the convent, you were out the next day and no one was told. So that I changed attitudes there a bit. And the word flung around like nobody's business. The nuns, though, the aunts, we had an aunt in Newbridge, my mother's sister, and she used to write me these letters of, don't bother, dear, coming to see me and we'll pray for you. So now I had no job, no house, no salary, no clothes as such, you know. But I thought, they'll be fine, it'll all come. And it's that youth, it's if you really love what you want to do and you're passionately interested in it, you'll find a way. So I took a job in Wange Gorman where no one would work, 1,300 mentally ill people. And then, but that was the time when Ivor Brown came and knocked down the walls and the whole community, it came out into the community. And it was a very exciting time actually. So I took the job there and then I saw about 30 flats. And then I saw the flat of my dream in Strand Road in Sandymount. And a great thing that happened was that my mother had left £500 in her will for me. But like Jerry said to me, no, he said, I can see him walking across the street in William Street, and he said to me, would you think of investing that in the business? I said, Jerry, I invested in what business? In our business. I said, you must be joking me. He was so kind to me. They both were. Gobnait was piling me with clothes, and I went back laden with food and what have you. But anyway, I went down at Christmas time, and the present I got was an electric blanket. And Jerry said, that's until the real thing comes along. Which I have such memories of it.
oh yeah, there was the baby chickens. Do you remember the time the baby chickens got killed? We had to get the baby chickens, and the thing is, there was thunder and lightning, and the light went out, and they all huddled together. It buried them all. They went up together and smothered one another. That was a loss now.
And then Gobnait was pregnant. She was either about to have a child, had a child, was recovering from a child and beginning another child. So it was a constant mass of what's happening next. And
do you remember when we were going away to Kilkee on a Sunday and we come back, the pool below was full of blood. The young fellas around just come in and kill the fish, the goldfish.
But then I'd be so worried, you know, somebody would fall through something, or somebody had a fever, or the kids. Oh yeah, there was always a minor crisis and a bigger crisis. And by the time I caught on to the crisis, there was a bigger crisis coming up the road.
But just the thing is, you wouldn't have time between a shop and a husband and children.
Road, like the time Diarmuid fell through the glass house. And I couldn't sleep at night. I was so worried. So I rang Gobnait 2 days later. I wasn't able to get to her till 2 days later. And I said, how are things? You know, this kind of a voice. How are you? How are things? Oh, she said, you heard about it. And I said, what? I said, Diarmuid, she'd moved on to some fella who'd done something with a van. I'd either bashed into somebody with a van or stolen something out of a van, you know. Priorities, you know. And I couldn't keep up with them. I could, you know, or the car broke down, or they had a new car, or whatever it was.
People say to me, do you remember that? I don't remember anything because It was the case of get up, change them, feed them, dress them, take them to school, then come back. I often went to school in my pyjamas and my pants over it. You know, by the time and you come back then, and then at 10 o'clock you to feed someone one them.
I left the medical missions in 1969, and I didn't meet Denson till 71. When we were finished, the organiser of the lecture handed me 2 cards, 2 envelopes, and when I handed it to Denson, we got into the car, he said, open it. It was Father Paul, OP, Order of Preachers, and opened it, and there was a cheque for £15, which was a fortune. And then I opened my card, there was nothing in it, only thank you, Miss Wall, for the very interesting lecture. But then I didn't see him again then for 3 months. And that was when Margaret's brother died, our friend. He rang me and said he was going down to say the Mass in Cork, because he was a friend of theirs. And there was another guy, so 4 of us went. Denson was with us, and he introduced me to his mother and sister. And then his sister had a cottage out in Schwaffen, and she invited me down, and he was there, and the relationship started to develop. I got the job in Coleraine in 73, the January of 73, and he left in April that year. April 74 was the next year, and he moved into my flat. I was paying for my flat, and so I asked him would he like to take over. So we married in 76, 3 years later. Well, to about 4 years, because he found it very difficult to get the papers. And the reason for that was because, whereas his friends got their papers very quickly, who had left, he didn't, because he'd been master of students. And they felt that if he left, it would have a very bad influence on the students.
Right.
And also because he would have been quite radical about Vatican II, and there was a kind of a reaction to it in some of the older Dominicans. So he felt that he needed, for his own spiritual survival, he needed to leave. But he had a very easy passage. His mother, after throwing a fizzy fit for the first day, then turned around and she was delighted. She'd prefer, I think, to have a son in Trinity rather than a poor Dominican. And then I got the job in Coleraine. I had to get a 98% mortgage. And when I went in to the mortgage people, he said to me, have you money left for furniture? And I said, no. He said, I'll give you a 99% mortgage. Different times. So that was great. Now Coleraine was very interesting, but very bad times. We were out at classes every other week with bomb scares. But it was a terrible time in Northern Ireland, terrible time. But I had one instant I wanted to buy a rug, that rug I have inside in the bedroom. I didn't know Belfast. I knew where the shop was, but I didn't know Belfast. And I thought, oh, Shaftesbury Square, I'll park here. It's only walk down to the main street. And I parked. There was no other car there. I thought, this is great. Off I went and left a note on the window, back in 10 minutes, back in 20 minutes. And I had high heel red shoes, and I left them on the seat. And I came back, and the whole crowd had gathered in a circle. I said, what's gone? They said, there's a car bomb. I said, oh God, where is it? And they said, there's a little car up there with Southern registration, and they're about to blow it up. I said, no, it's my car. They can't, it's my car. So I ran past this cordon, they were, all back. And he said, who are you? So they sat me into their police car. And he said, we'll take you down to we can't reverse the order. Once an order is given, we can't reverse the order. Oh, I said, please let me explain. So they put me into the car and they drove me to the police station. And they took statements and they reversed the order. And they came back with me and made sure, and they were very nice then. And he said to me, how could you have left a note in no zone? This is not a parking zone. I said, I said, you would have seen my shoes. The note. So I got my car back. Never to do it again, I can tell you. Were the best 20 years of my life. Almost to the day, 20 years. Because I was just so blessed to find somebody like Denson. Denson was the kind of man who was totally present to you. And what happened was, like when he was teaching Cabinteely, everybody saw him as their personal counsellor. Everybody would say when Denson would come into a room, he'd light up, you know. He was very quiet, but totally tuned in. It's very hard. I think he was probably the most grounded person I ever met.
Do you remember the one we had in the shop? And I think she diddled us. I often remember I had a girl, do you remember the one we used to have coming in and she used to say to me, Mrs. Kelly, aren't I very like? And Nana Muscori. Do you remember her? She was cracked. But she'd have you split laughing. Another one I liked was Mrs. Levy. And sometimes at the end of the month, she'd always bring you down a box of cream buns. You see, we'd sit down every day when she'd come. Not when she'd come, first she'd go have a cup of tea and a bun. She was very honest. Maura and Tessie. Oh, Paddy Ryan that had the co-op. Noni. Bertie Hart, yeah. Willie Bates. Mike Keys. Keys was a young fella that came during his holiday when he was finished from school. And do you remember Margaret we had? The one that used to look after chickens. Mm-hmm. And we never used that plucking machine we bought. Catherine and Nanny Kelly was crazy about her. I remember saying to Nanny Kelly one day, she isn't doing anything in school. Don't you dare talk about that child like that. She was stone mad about her. But the time she got the stroke, Nanny Kelly was out cutting the grass. And Catherine says to her, Nana, you're not taking the heads off the daisies at all. That's when they knew she had a stroke. Sinead, Fiona, Kate, and the last one, what's her name? The boy is the last anyway, Kaz. Oh, yeah. Isn't Fiona expecting a baby? Will I think about Sean now? You see, he was born the 11th of January and my birthday was the 12th, and he had this pancake, Daddy sent for pancakes down to, I suppose, John Street Bakery. And Daddy said to him, what are you doing with that? Oh, I'm keeping that for Mammy. Would you give it to me? He said. No, because you didn't born me. And I remember Jerry said to me, don't eat one bit of that packet, it's full of wee-wees. 3 girls, Deirdre, Maeve, and the last little one, Rachel, yeah. Mary was always a little pretty thing. Oh yes, and my mother was mad about Mary. Of course, she was called after her. And when she went into the home, you know, and we'd bring her in the morning because her own cronies would be going to see her. And here she be to me, Mary, how many times did your mammy change your dress yesterday? She didn't change it on. Well, I changed her frock every day, and she'd do Mary's curls. And she'd go up to bed for a rest after dinner, and the doctor said she must have a complete rest. So Mary would go after her. She mad about Mary. Mary's is Debbie. Paddy, yeah, I know Paddy, but Ailish, yeah. That's all, isn't it? Oh, yes. He was above the cot, and he tore the outside cover and the inside cover of the pillow, and he stuck the foam up his nose. And Bill, I suppose was he 3 up his nose anyway, and you go in the morning to the room, he was sleeping with someone else. He'd be dancing away around the cot. This terrible smell. Desperate smell. He took his teddy, I remember, with him. And anyway, they got it down. Snots and all. It's easy. Rory. Gobnait was always very pretty looking, you know. Oh, she didn't walk for a long time. And we were worried. We didn't want to send a penny. So this day, my mother used to come out. There was Gobnait, and she waddling away from the kitchen window down as far as the hen house. And she put her 2 hands up on the wall, and she took her time, and she turned around and came up again. Well, I was delighted. Gobnait, I have Sarah, Liam, and the other little one, Kelly, yeah. Gerard, you were born outside in the nursing home, and I couldn't bring you home with me. You were the only one I didn't nurse. Nana Kelly decided the best thing was to leave that child there, and you getting your feet. But said after you I had all the terrible hemorrhages. And the best thing they said was to shift me into St. John's, and they did. And whatever blood I got wasn't able to mix with my own blood. And I had a rag, oh God, I thought I was dying. David. But anyway, Patrick was very small. He was he 7 pounds? He was very small, I remember that. And then I remember he got out his teeth and he bled like anything that night at home. I would take him back in next day to the doctor over in the city home. 2 or 3 of you would get out your teeth together. 2 boys. He has Jerry and the other lad that calls himself after his mother's side. Paddy, yeah. Dear man, he hadn't a hole in his chest, but his chest was gone in. And I used to be taking him up to some place around St. Joseph's there, where they'd have a clinic, and they used to make him put cotton wool on the table and blow at it. Oh, then, when I brought him out of the hospital, he couldn't take cow's milk, I don't believe, forever. I think it was some infection he got in the milk. So, we got 2 goats. 2 boys, yeah. Shane and Richard. Marguerite. She was a live wire, Marguerite. The nun told me she was mixing with the wrong set, and that to try and get her to mix with the right set that would have, you know, an application for study. She only went to the Mount, and she had pals up there prospecting. I don't know where they're very nice. Margaret has got Sean, and the other one is Kate Luby and Niamh, yeah. Well, Corinne and Sinead were always fighting. I remember one day outside in Nearville and hearing all this shouting above in the room, and I went up and they were like tinkers. Now, tinkers, but Sinead said that she had a a kind of a magic friend down the garden. Did you ever hear that? Ask her about it sometime. She'd a friend down the garden that she used to talk to. Imaginary, of course. You know, of course, I'd say she was very bright. She has got Shawnee, Leo, Tara. I was going to Dublin and I was taking, must be Sinead with me. I don't know, was it? See, Maura always wanted Sinead up because she's her godmother. And I didn't send to Karina. And I think it was Mary came out. Well, I know Mary Gaffey was there. And how is it she isn't taking use as... I could have killed Mary Gaffey. Mary Gaffey spurt out things like that now. And I said, she's too small. And I don't mind screaming. I'll start roaring, crying when I see them getting ready to go. And then she'll take me with her. You see the way they all plan it out? The two, she has got... oh God, she has got a little boy and a little girl. Yeah, Fiona's the little boy, and the little girl is what? I can't think of it now. That'll be 28. It's not bad, is it?
And then I remember holidays. Gobnait and I went on holidays, and then Gobnait and Denson and myself went. We went to Keswick, to the Lake District together, over to Rosemary's place. We went to Killarney, we went to the west of Ireland. Then we linked up. I was going to international conferences that time because I was in the family mediation service. And Gobnait and I, she came with me to San Francisco, and we had a great week there because I was giving a paper there, and we were staying in the Hilton, or the big hotel, and we had a lovely time. And then another time we went and we stayed with the cousins in Michigan, the Kennedys, and then Gobnait went on to Trinidad, and I went again to, can't remember from where I went, but I went somewhere from there, I think back to Boston. And then we went to New Zealand, and we went in at Christmas time, just after Christmas, and I was giving a talk in Hong Kong, so we went via Hong Kong, spent 3 days there. And then where else did we go? Oh, then we started going, the year after that, then we started going over to the west of Ireland, to the same, either to Westport or to Tuckfabra, which was outside Galway. So they're very good memories. But the great thing is that how it shows, looking back now, my thanks now is to have been blessed with that family, even though I'm the aunt and the verge. I feel it was looking at how each of you, you know, coped with your own and have done so well and have found your own. Now, that doesn't mean there haven't been difficult and hard times for everybody, it's part of life, but there has been, Gobnait can look at her family and really thank God. As she said to me the last time I was down, isn't it wonderful? It was at Catherine's do, and she isn't it all, they're all here, she says, and they're all mine. I thought, God, the proud mother, you know. They're all here and they're all mine.
We'll go to Jasmine, will we? Jasmine.